Hey, everybody. Welcome back, and thanks again for joining us today. I wanted to real quickly once again point in your direction the resources for our conference sponsor 3M. So if you take a look up in the right-hand corner of your screen, there are some sponsor brochures. And then there is also some bonus CE content that you can access as some CE that's available outside of today's conference. So feel free to click on those and grab a few extra CEs on top of the 6 that we have today. Also, quickly, again, if there are any issues with audio or video, feel free to go ahead and refresh your browser. That often fixes any issues associated with the technology that we're using. So also, if there are questions, feel free to drop it into the Q&A box. And if you do have questions for our presenters, please also feel free to drop those in there. We love questions, and if we don't have time to get to all of them today, we will certainly filter them over to our presenters or panelists, I should say, and they will get back to you on those answers. So without further ado, let me bring along our speakers for today. Yves Theodule is a manager of sterile processing at Advocate Aurora Christ Medical Center. Yves has the responsibility of managing the day-to-day operations of sterile processing in the outpatient pavilion and main hospital, as well as the GI scope processing team. He and his team continue to raise the bar in the field by being first in Illinois to receive the DNV certification for his department. His department also won the Healthcare Purchasing News SPD of the Year for 2018. So congrats on that, and congrats to all of our winners today. Our next person joining Yves is Katie Sikora. Katie is the Executive Director of Surgical and Endoscopy Services over at Advocate Aurora. So welcome, Katie. The presentation title is Marching to Zero, Leadership, Vision, and SPD Success. How many unsterile trays are waiting for you every morning when you arrive in sterile processing? You feel you're always playing catch up, but constantly falling behind. In this panel discussion, find out how embracing the concepts of process improvement and lean methodology reorganize the department at Advocate Aurora Christ Medical Center and earn them the 2018 SPD of the Year award. Please join me in welcoming Yves and Katie on the virtual stage.
All right, thank you, Brett. And yeah, welcome to this session of Conference of Champions. Thank you all for sticking with us today. A lot of great stories already, and I know we've got another great story here. The Advocate Christ story, Marching to Zero, Leadership, Vision, and Sterile Processing Success. With us today, as Brett already mentioned, we got Yves and Katie. Let's just get started. Who are y'all? And how did you get at your local facility, at your hospital?
Yves?
Yeah. Well, I'm Yves Theodule. I'm the manager of sterile processing and also GI processing. I've been in the field for 32 years. I started out in one of the largest hospitals in Chicago. And really quickly, I had a passion for sterile processing and jumped into leadership and been in leadership for over 20 plus years and been enjoying it. I ended up here at Christ Hospital. I noticed there was a position available for an outpatient manager. I thought I was going to take it easy and just work as an outpatient manager, but
that's right. Is that Monday through Friday, right? No weekends.
Right. No one's calling you on the weekends with any fires. So I applied for that position and I started working here. And fortunately, I was able to, just grow from there. And now I'm over inpatient, sterile processing and GI lab. So I've been enjoying the journey ever since. I've been here 9 years.
All right. What about you, Katie? What's your story, background, and then how'd you end up there?
Sure. So Katie Sikora, I am the Executive Director of Surgical and Endoscopy Services. I started at Advocate 20 years ago. So almost right out of school, I did traumatic brain injury downtown for about 2 years. And then transferred here actually to do neurosurgery. I wanted to learn a little bit more, got into the OR, absolutely loved it. Really started working with the teams, and we had an educator position that came open, and I wanted to grow a little bit more and really just support everything I was seeing and how could I help make change and make things better for not just my team I was working with, but the patients and my physicians. And just kind of moved up from there. I worked as a manager for about 6 or 7 years, then the director role, and then the executive director. But really just, I love working at Advocate Christ and partnering with Yves and the sterile processing department. I probably get a lot of passion from him. He is a wonderful leader, connects to purpose, and I'm just excited to be able to sit here today and support him in the story of what he's really done as a leader for sterile processing.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, that passion is infectious. That's an important kind of point, here at the outset, is that anybody, it doesn't even have to be like a fellow leader. Like, you can get one passionate person in sterile processing on the operating room team, in administration, who says, like, we're going to build something great, that just kind of spills over, and then everyone else, catches it, and it becomes their passion. It's not always feeding off of it, but it starts at kind of an epicenter. And yeah, that's a great story. And I think we're going to hear a little bit more about Yves' passion here. But I want to go back to you real quick, Yves. You mentioned you kind of jumped into leadership at some point in your career. And I think Beyond Clean, right, we talk a lot about leadership. We talk a lot about professional development. A lot of folks in our industry, like, they want to go that route as they grow their career. I'm wondering if you can give us a little more specifics about what that jump actually looked like. Like, where was the opportunity? How'd you know that you wanted to do this? Just give us a little more insight on that.
Sure. So I did not know that I wanted to do this. I was a technician, and the passion was being a technician. I'm very competitive, so everyone around me, I wanted to beat them in doing trays. I wanted to beat them in doing case cards. I
know people like that.
I just had a passion, for being a technician. And interestingly enough, I was working in this one hospital on the south side of Chicago, and there was no leader in sterile processing. So they bring in a nurse leader and ask me to train that person, and after they were trained for a little bit, they would leave, and I would jump in and help supervise the department. So that happens about 3 times, and then on the 4th time, one of the managers there that I was training said to me, "Yves, you should be the manager. You could do this." And I didn't see it, but she saw something in me that I didn't see. And sure enough, one day I took the chance and applied at the big one, the biggest one. And that's where I was baptized by fire. So the leader there, she was able to, to teach. She was a teacher at heart. You could tell that she loved to teach. And so she showed all her new leaders that was under her how to do the leadership job. And from there on, so it was in that hospital, I was a specialty supervisor, which was over neuro-orthopedics. And then I became a supervisor. After that, the manager, I became the director of the department after some years later.
Awesome. Yeah. That the impact of having someone else believe in you is hard to overstate, because there's a lot of fear in this role, in the manager role, in the director role, because there's no one else to kind of look to and say, hey, what do we do now, right? Because like, you get that as a technician, you even get that as a supervisor. You always have someone else to be like, okay, I'm confused. I don't know what to do. I would do, boss. But when you're the boss, it all kind of comes down on your shoulders in some sense to make those decisions when it's gray areas. And so that finding that confidence in yourself sometimes is hard. So I appreciate you sharing that story. Getting into the award itself, this is the Conference of Champions. We're talking about the award-winning season that y'all put together, kind of like a football season there. But you won the award in 2018, but I actually want to start prior to that and kind of build a snapshot for folks of what everything looked like before the big push, before all the intersection of the improvements and the staffing and the culture came together. Like, what did things look like a year or two before that?
I'll start that.
Sure. So I think where a lot of sterile processing departments can start is, I think we talked a lot about they're our foundation. And maybe we're not seen as the foundation in the beginning, and there wasn't a lot of understanding of what sterile processing did within the organization or what they needed. So we started tracking and looking at our opportunities upstairs in the OR, and then came downstairs to sterile processing. And we had a lot of opportunities just with storage of instruments and how they were getting damaged, and drilling into why we were seeing the damage. I think Yves could talk to, and I'm sure many people have seen the barrel of monkeys when you go into a cabinet or a drawer and you're pulling out one instrument and you get 10 instruments because they're tangled together. And we had a lot of turnover in the department at that time, and just a lot of opportunity to make changes. We were coming into unsterile trays in the morning, and it just kind of set the tone for the day. As soon as the team walked in, they just saw this mountain of instruments that needed to get done. And we wanted to make that change as a team together, and how we could make sure that we were bringing quality instruments to our patients. I think you can talk a little bit more about that.
Yep. So walking into the department, it was, since I've worked in several of them, it was a typical sterile processing. Chaos at 7 o'clock in the morning. There was a lot of running around to try to put out fire. We called the day shift the firefighters, because that's what they did, with most of their time, just putting out fires. So there was very little structure on what needed to be done. So there was a lot of surgeon dissatisfaction because of just trays not being prepared and ready to go. The department had a shortage of staff. It was just a lot of things. When we came into the department, there was these, I don't know if you know what those Sears tools drawers.
All right.
That's what we use as a storage system. And there was no par level for instruments. There was no one managing the instruments for shortage or for overage. It was just a lot of broken processes. And so the manager prior to that, unfortunately, was so busy putting out fires, they had no time to put things, put some structure into the department.
I think everybody listening is going to know what that feels like. So busy putting out fires, and especially that description of the morning in sterile processing, that critical kind of 7 a.m., 6:30 to 7 a.m. kind of time slot. But you brought up, I think it was maybe Katie who said the trays that are unprocessed in the morning, and that really is that's a warning sign, right, that there's something in the process, or there's some things in the process that are just not as efficient as they should be. If it's staffing, if it's process, if it's data, if it's equipment, there's a lot of contributing factors to that. And it could be all the above or some of the above. But I think it's helpful, for folks to hear in these stories that it's not like the department was at this high pinnacle for years and years and years, and then you just finally won this award, but you came from somewhere, in your words, Yves, that was kind of chaotic. And that's not uncommon, right? That's all of our stories. We know the chaos at 7 a.m, even extremely high performing departments who've got great processes and great teams and everything else. One thing can happen, like the cart wash should go down, or, autoclave go down, or someone calls in sick, and the chaos can start. But even amidst that, to your other point, really forcing yourself and your team to find the time to look past the fires and to look into tomorrow in the future and say, hey, today's going to be chaotic, but tomorrow can be maybe a little less chaotic, and then the day after that, and that's how you get to places like you have. So let's talk about that story then. I know in the write-up in HPN, a big part of the story was tied to lean methodology, to process improvement as it's applied to your sterile processing team. Talk us through why that in particular was such an integral part of your award and your success. And maybe let's just start with a definition, because I think we kind of hear those terms thrown out a lot, and we're like, I don't exactly know what that means. I'm one of them. So let's define what we mean when we say lean methodology.
I guess I'll start there. Yeah. For the lean methodology for us, we were very lucky that we engaged our executive team, really bringing them downstairs into sterile processing, seeing what was happening, getting our team members to talk with them to understand. So we were able to get some additional team members to help us from a project management standpoint, who had this background in lean methodology. So they came in and just supported us. This was really more about the frontline team and them giving the feedback and them letting us know where the barriers were and opportunities. But from a lean standpoint, we learned through our project managers a lot more about doing spaghetti diagrams, and went through and created those.
Yeah, what is that? Yeah. What is a spaghetti diagram? Okay.
So following the process of a spaghetti diagram is where you watch each team member and what they do throughout the day, and you really draw out, and it looks like a big pile of spaghetti on a piece of paper of, when I pick up an instrument and I'm putting a tray together, where do I have to go to get my indicator? Where do I have to go to get the wrap? Where do I have to go to get my container? How many times am I leaving where I'm supposed to be for the day and putting extra time into completing a tray, or being efficient, or being able to find something and it's expired, so now I have to go find another product to replace it. Broken instruments. So really, we diagrammed all of that out to show the inefficiencies that we had, and then you break that down to find those opportunities of, okay, where can we move the equipment to, or the supplies that works best for you and where you're working?
Reduce the footprint.
Yeah, reduce the footprint. We also did the success. So you want to talk about success?
So, before all of this, I just have to say, Hank, that we can't skip the part of how we have senior leadership support. Mm-hmm. I'm speaking from our president, vice president, and on down, all the way to my executive director. The amount of support that we receive, it is so critical. And I believe this is one of the things that happen in every sterile processing. When you have senior leadership who don't understand what sterile processing is. So, no, tell you the truth, it's rare that you find, a true understanding of what's needed and what's necessary to get a sterile processing to run. So we are so blessed to have senior leadership understanding. I'll never forget, one of our president, we have a great president now that just started, but one of our president who was, I don't know if I can say his name, but his name is Matt Premack, who heard the story of sterile processing, heard the surgeons, heard, all of the team that was, all of the broken things that was happening in sterile processing. And he took the time to come down and speak to us. And from that point on, Katie gave us a goal. And once we received the goal and where we were going, and we had senior leadership support, that was the gas in our engine. That was the wheels on the car. That was the engine in the vehicle, so now we can move. We're no longer on 4 flats. So most sterile processing, you find them on 4 flats and they're looking to blame someone on why it's broken. And senior leadership is looking to terminate the person that's not, doing the job in sterile processing to repair the issue. But this team, and this is why I've been here 9 years, the support that I find from my boss and how supportive she is. And I'm not just saying that because she's sitting here. She has gone above and beyond for the sterile processing team. Matter of fact, I don't even have to sit here and speak about sterile processing. She can handle it herself. Didn't know this stuff. She took the time to educate herself. And she is so well knowledge of all of this stuff here. And we were able to put our heads together, and with senior leadership backup, we started out with number one thing we did, we blew out a room downstairs because we needed a command center, a huddle room. So in that huddle room, I wish we had pictures. We have, different areas, different things that we speak on, because we huddle 3 times a day. Every shift have to stop and come to huddle. And leadership is in huddle. Not only the supervisors, but manager is also in the huddle for the shift that they're on. And we want to start out with, number one, how many trays do we have on the shelf right now? If it's 7 o'clock in the morning, you have 400 trays on the shelf. Or let's use easier number to follow, 100 trays on the shelf at 7 o'clock in the morning. And how many technicians do you have working on those trays? If you have set a goal in the department for a technician to do 25 trays in an 8-hour shift, and they have to handle 1,120 instruments in that 8-hour, have you put enough technicians on trays to get that number to 0? If you have not...
Yeah, so I can do the math. If you don't have 4, then you're going to be short.
That's right. You're going to be short. So who is to blame for that? Is it the technicians who didn't pull their weight? Or is it the leaders who didn't put enough people on trays to... So we had to be transparent about it. So we have a board that describes that each shift, and you get to see the prior shift, and you get to see the current shift, and what we're... So we had goals, and that's when we started to get the department moving.
I want to go back to this conversation of engaging that leadership, because I agree, Yves, like that's critical. And again, that's going to be another theme that has already come up and will continue to come up through this conference. I don't think any team that has won this award has done so without that executive support that you mentioned. But you brought up something else, that it's not uncommon for our hospital presidents, for instance, to not have had any direct experience with sterile processing in their career. And so it can be very foreign, and there can kind of be an assumption of, how hard can it be? They're just down there, washing things. It's a standard process. Everything's kind of simple. But I'm curious, and maybe Katie, this is a question for you on that topic of lean methodology. That's something that I think every hospital executive is aware of. Like, lean is a big buzzword these days. Is that something that was useful in your scenario, or maybe could be useful in other scenarios for just bridging that knowledge gap of, hey, you may not know anything about the processes itself, but just know we're applying lean down in SPD. There's going to be a lot of great things that happen about it. We want you involved. Can we start here? Like, how that process kind of work in that context?
Sure. So I think we're all about connecting to purpose and really bringing that back. And we use that with our executive team too, bringing stories from the team members, bringing stories from our physicians, and then backing that up with data, right? Because data is transparent. Data shows you exactly what's going on and where you really need to be focused at. So we took some of the connect to purpose, we took some of the stories, we took some of the data, and we really talked about where the opportunities lie for us to support our department and bring the best opportunities to sterile processing as, again, the foundation to the house. If you want us to do quality surgery, I need to have quality instruments, right? It starts there. That's the starting point. So it was really just bringing that story. And like Yves said, we were very lucky sitting with our executive team, talking with them. We also have a medical director that was a new role for us. We had not had a medical director before. And we are really lucky that he is super engaged and very passionate. And he started out by saying, this is like the Wizard of Oz, and I want to pull the curtain back, and I want to learn what and who's controlling what behind that. And most surgeons don't do that. It's just kind of, I have my instruments and here we are. So he went downstairs with us. He learned a little bit about sterile processing. He said, can I help put a tray together? Like, show me how this process works. And then he helped go to the executive team with us and talk about what we needed to do and using this lean methodology and really saying, this is process improvement. We talk a lot about being a high reliable organization, and how do we tie that? Well, to be high reliability, we have to fix the processes. And again, it's the process, it's not the people. It's about really focusing on those barriers. And I think taking that all and telling that story, and again, you have to have the data behind it, when you're going to the C-suite, and showing that, and then in the long term, what it was going to provide, from making sure that we had good engagement downstairs and that we didn't have turnover with our team members, and that we were providing quality trays, so less surgical site infections, and physicians are happier, and you bring volume from that, and you take care of your community that way. So I think it's just really tying that whole story together when you're explaining it to them and asking for those resources.
That role that you mentioned, the medical director, that's not a common conversation I think that we have out there. Like, we're all about, hey, let's get the president involved, let's get the VP involved, let's get quality and risk and IP. But that medical director piece, I'm glad you brought that up, because I know even in my past too, and we're going to, we've got a session in this event that I'm interviewing my former manager, Bobby Parker, who won the award in 2016. And we also had a very engaged medical director, but I hadn't really put those two pieces together about how powerful that was. So great takeaway for anyone who's listening. If you're not already talking to and engaging your medical director to go track them down, figure out where they are, and bring them down at SPD. So yeah, that's a great point.
Just to thank our medical director. I just have to, just give him his props because he is an amazing, amazing guy. The team knows him. They love him. He comes to sterile processing. I mean, the amount of people that comes to sterile processing that you never see in other hospitals is a wonderful thing. And still to this day, you can tell that everyone that was the original group that was there from our senior leadership has passed that information down because our current leaders are just as supportive. They back us up. It's not about blaming, looking who they can blame. We don't have that relationship between, senior leadership or the OR. It's about, we have a problem, let's find a resolution together. And that was so important that we built that type of relationship. My boss has never, blame me or point the finger. It's usually, let's try to figure this out together. And it works so well when you have the OR and SPD working so well together. It's no longer, oh my God, I gotta, I'm about to get run over.
Well, I know on our podcast and out in the industry, there's always conversation about training in sterile processing and try to get our technicians into the OR to see what's going on. There's not as much conversation about getting everybody else into SPD to see what's going on. So like you bring that up, it's not just administration, like it's all of these different folks, from the surgeons, from the nurses coming down through on a regular basis. You also mention the turnover of leadership and the importance of not forgetting, hey, maybe our new VP is not aware of this. Let's get them down in like week 1 so that as they're making decisions, they're tuned in to everything we've got going on and they're part of that ongoing conversation. So I want to go back to something that Katie said too and kind of transition here to the people part of this because in all of these award stories, it's the people that do the process. We're going to talk about the processes here in a second and all the impact and everything else, but at the core, a great lean process still needs people in there that are compliantly following whatever that new process is or what the new steps is. Can you talk to us and kind of give us some highlights from your perspective on how the people part of this story led to all the success that you've had?
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead, Yves. Yeah, that's fine.
So the people part is important because we can start, at technician level. Okay, technician level, if you don't have great technician, people that's buying into the dream that you have, it's hard to sell a dream when you're in the middle of a chaotic department. And to tell you the truth, sometimes my boss had to sell me the dream to say, hey, Yves, we're almost there. I see light at the end of the tunnel. And sometimes, I couldn't see the light. And you just need to keep pushing. So number one thing is hiring the right people. We have, every hospital have a structured question to go by during the interview. Your job as a leader is you want to be able to look behind that wall to see who is really behind that wall, because when you're interviewing, people are going to tell you exactly what you want to hear. And
Right.
following those sets of questions, and we're required to follow those sets of questions. And, by the way, they share the questions with their friends as interviewing there, so they already know the answer. So your job as a leader is to do follow-up questions, tag on and ask other questions. You need to understand, do you have, number one, a person sitting in front of you with integrity? That's the hands down. We need people with integrity. If you're washing the instruments and decontam, will you do a good job, or are you doing a good job when someone eye is on you? We call those, eye servants. As long as someone's eyes on you, you're moving around, doing a lot of movement. But when leaders go away or when that eye is gone, what type of work are you producing? So integrity is very, very important for sterile processing. And
that's an interesting place to start, because I don't think that is the starting point for a lot of folks out there hiring today, especially looking at the resume, right? Because you can't really tell that integrity piece from the resume. But to your point, with the right line of questioning in the right ears to hear, you can dig into that. What would this person do, or how would this person act if they're not being supervised, right? I think they call that the Hawthorne effect, that, if you're being watched, and you're going to work a little harder, you're going to be a little more detail oriented, but you want folks who can do that even without the supervision, as you're explaining. So that I want to, before you continue, because you were just talking about hiring, but how does that thread of integrity then flow through into how you train and how you promote those folks within your department? Do you carry that through the entire kind of career progression?
Sure, most definitely. So think of your frontline leaders, right? So think of your supervisors, your educator. That's a key person. If you don't have an educator and you're the educator as a leader, your folks are watching you. They're going to duplicate whatever you're producing. So if you're walking around doing inappropriate things in the department, talking about wash that instrument in the sink and send it up so they can flash it, where's the integrity there? Your folks are going to do even worse if they see their manager or their leader doing, a horrible job with integrity. So, so my upfront leaders, we hold them accountable to the highest standard, because and I don't want to make it sound like this is a lot of pressure, because we have a lot of fun in sterile processing. My team know that I love them, I care for them, and I will go above and beyond for all of them. And it's so important that your frontline leaders are passing that information on. Everyone in that leadership team are carrying themselves with integrity and thinking on their toes.
Right. Well, and you brought up educator, and that's also true, just for your preceptors as well. And that's why I wanted to bring up that integrity piece, is because it's easy as a manager to fall into this thing of like, well, I want preceptors who just know the technical, who know the process, and can teach the process, and that's all that I need. But if they don't have integrity, to your point, even if they know the process, even if they know all the regulatory things you should do, it's that stuff you kind of see on the internet. It's like, well, this is how you should do it, but let me show you how I do it. And if you're teaching those new technicians that again and again and again, then you just wake up one day and your whole department is filled up with people who do not have the integrity that you're describing. So yeah, that's a very, very critical application to not only hire, but then train in that same vein. Let's talk a little bit more about the culture piece, and I'm going to throw this to the OR here because it's a systemic conversation and challenge in sterile processing that we tend to just not get along with our OR partner. So how did you manage that natural us versus them kind of mentality through the chaos, and then also, through the changes that led to really building something that everyone on the perioperative team could be proud of?
Sure. So it is definitely a culture that exists, I think, in most hospitals between OR and sterile processing. And I think Eve and I had a lot of conversations around it and how could we fix it. And I think one of the biggest things was just as leaders rounding together, showing that we were on the same page, being transparent, supporting the teams together. If there were calls, Eve would call me, I could go to the room with him. If he had something downstairs, I would go downstairs with him, and really showing that support across the board. And then it was a lot of education with our team members, really just talking with them about the importance and bringing in AORN and, bringing those recommendations and talking about it is the OR's responsibility to start cleaning upstairs. Like, we need to clean the instruments, and educating behind it about what we do and how it supports downstairs. And it keeps us from pitting the instruments, rusting, the damage that you see upstairs that you get so frustrated by. We have to start it here. And so we started talking through that. And then we started working on some opportunities using some of the tracking technology that we have on how could we track defects, again, focused on the barriers and not the people. And that was a lot of our conversation. And we share that data in sterile processing. We share it up in the OR. Sterile processing can put it in, OR can put it in. So as a team, we are working to find the opportunities. And I think that was just a constant message. As a team, not as OR, not as sterile processing, but as a surgical team, how are we going to make this better? How are we going to support each other? And then I think another really key role that we brought in was the OR SPD liaisons. So we created a position where we took OR techs who had a lot of experience in the OR, brought them down to sterile processing, had them learn a bit about sterile processing. And then we have 2 that are stationed downstairs usually and 2 that are stationed upstairs who have conversations, but they help do the training. So I have OR techs going into the OR, talking to the OR team and explaining why things may have happened, or, hey, we found this downstairs. We need to make sure that we do this a little bit differently. We handle the trays differently upstairs. And then they're also able to go downstairs and have that conversation. And then we also added to our orientation upstairs in the OR, 2 weeks that they're with our orientees. So any orientee that we bring in spends 2 full weeks downstairs in sterile processing. And they get that connection with the team, and they learn about everything that they do downstairs, because in all honesty, when you become an OR nurse or OR tech, you have no idea what happens downstairs in sterile processing. I get my instruments and that's what I knew. So adding that to the training, people say, oh, you're just downstairs cleaning instruments. But it's so much more than that. The amount of chemicals and things that you need to know and how to clean and the different instruments, and just giving that 2-week vision to these team members really helps them when they're upstairs to remember, hey, I was down there, I saw the phone calls coming down, I saw what was happening, and I think it bridged that gap to allow us to continue to work together. And then I think the one last thing that we did to help with that was building the OR SPD Quality Committee, which is a multidisciplinary team. So frontline team members, leaders, infection prevention, you name it, we all come together once a month to talk about what our opportunities are across the board. And we also have our external areas like labor and delivery, endoscopy that come, just so that we can, again, work on it as a team and not pointing fingers at each other and just kind of saying, well, it must be in the other department because it wasn't upstairs.
And in those meetings, you talk about like point of view, you talk about delayed cases, turnovers, those kind of things. Okay.
Yep. We have surgical site infections. We talk about delays. Every defect that we have, every safety event that may be put in, or good catch or near miss, all of that gets reviewed and drilled down into, and everybody gives feedback on opportunities that we have or additional training we need to do or whatever to bridge and build our team together.
Of that.
I think I remember a story, speaking of, not pointing a finger and having a relationship. One time, one of my technicians left something that was disposable in a tray. That happened in every sterile processing, going too fast, whatever the reason is. But here I am in the OR, and I'm getting yelled at by the surgeon. And one of the OR leaders, I'll never forget it. That was when I knew that this hospital was, we were in a different place with the operating room. And the surgeon is, really upset because it's causing delay in his case. And one of the leaders stepped in front of me and said, "However, doctor, we left it in a tray when we should have removed it in the OR."
Wow.
And he went, but Yves team should have taken it off. And it's true. It is our job. We should have, we're the final verification. We have to send perfect trays to the OR. But then she stepped in front. She said, "But doc, we left it on the tray. I understand that they left it also, but we need to do our part." So it was not, you could tell it was a team effort. We were brainstorming on how to solve the issue. She didn't want to point the finger at the department, and now I have to try to, point my finger to say, "Y'all left it." No, you left it, y'all. So,
yeah, no, that's a tremendous story of ownership. And the power of ownership, to own the process and the mistakes and the wins. And yeah, without that, it kind of deteriorates into that us versus them mentality.
Right.
And, going back to what Katie was saying about the OR liaison or the SPD liaison positions, I'm a massive fan of that. I think that's going to come up once or twice in these various sessions as well, because I know that's such a critical, gateway or pathway between the two departments, that there's that constant communication, that level of trust that begins to be built in, that goes both ways, right, between the two teams. So great insights there. I want to, in the interest of time, we got a lot more to talk about. I want to transition to the process piece, because we've talked about this, kind of high level, but I want to get into the weeds, as they say. We talked a little bit about like the fact that you did work through lean methodologies, you did the spaghetti diagrams and everything, but specifically, what kinds of process changes and improvements can you point back to now and say that change was a critical piece, even though it was small, a critical piece to what began changing everything across that workflow?
Let's say organization. So it took forever to find, a lot of things have changed, and we can go on all day listing them. But one of them was to organize the surgical instruments, take them out of that bin that it's in and put it on a pegboard, organize. And we have these cards with the pictures of the items all the way in the back. So when you run out, you know exactly what's there. We have instrument specialists that maintain those walls. Their job is to order instruments. They're also the ones that's finding the non-conformity trays. If you have trays that's missing instruments, they're just sitting on the shelf. We need to complete those trays so they don't make it into the OR. And now you have customers, dissatisfied because of not having. So once we had that organized, it took a little bit for my staff to get used to the new organized walls of instruments, because they were used to finding them in the drawers, even though they were not organized. They knew where to find things because
They've been there for 20 years, right? They're like, I know it's the third drawer down from the left. That's where it's supposed to be.
So we've organized, the entire wall, and we started to organize the workstations. It had to be easy for them to find stuff. Don't go looking for indicators. Katie mentioned the spaghetti diagram. We look at the footprints of how many times they had to walk back and forth, and here's 10 workstation with one paper printer and one label printer. So everyone is printing their label, and they have to go through everybody else's label to find their label for their trays. And then we needed a great tray tracking system. So it was important to find the right tray tracking system, because the one we had, there was some blind spots that we could not track. So we went through that process of changing that. We went, what else?
So I think one of the other things that is not necessarily organization, it was bringing the team together for that huddle. You talked a little bit about the huddle room.
Yeah.
But it is bringing everybody together. And I will say it is not led by the leaders, that huddle. A lot of times when you go to huddles, it's the managers or the leadership speaking to the team. The team actually owns it. So part of lean technology is part of that training and high reliability is creating zone leaders. So somebody who's assigned each day to their zone, and it's not just about the trays. They bring forward opportunities within the department. So we had a light that was broken. We have a washer that went out. And they discuss it at those huddles, and they bring it up. And then there's, at the next huddle, it's where are our follow-ups from that. And so the team is helping own that. And I really think that created some additional sort of, this is my home. And, I'm dedicated to it because, we have the resources now and I can make a change. And I think that was a really big piece to it, bringing it in. And again, in that room, we have everything posted, so it's very transparent and that everybody can see what's going on. And then they also created a competency board, which I think that's really important to the team. So it has a picture of every team member that we have downstairs with their names, and then each thing that they're proficient in. So it can tell us whether or not they're training in it, whether they are competent in it, they're an expert in it, or they're the best person for you to go to if you have a question. So every new team member can go to that board and say, okay, I'm going to look for, whoever's best in decontam to help me with this issue. And they can go right to it and figure out who it is and find that person to help support them.
I love that. Yeah. That's a very important part of the process, even though that's very people oriented, as you said. And, I want to come out and say that it's probably been evident, through this conversation, but to highlight that the lean process or that lean methodology isn't a top-down. You brought this up a couple times. It's a grassroots, what's happening on the front line, what needs to be fixed, what needs to be changed, how do you want to change it, Mr. and Mrs. Technician, and then let's implement and then scale those processes back up. So I think that's very important for folks to hear. Do you have something else to say?
No, I was just going to say, being proactive, looking at things ahead of time. So you don't want to wait until your washers are not working. You're smelling the blood on the instrument to say, maybe we should call someone out. You want to test those washers. You want to test your ultrasonic. You want to test your chemicals that's coming out of the washers. You want to swab your instrumentation using an ATP machine to see how much ATP is being left on the instruments after it's being washed. How about your scopes? Are you testing them? Are you testing your scope after the hand wash? To verify that the technicians are doing a great job. And who's managing all of that? Who's watching all of that stuff? It's very, very important to have the right people watching that stuff, holding the team accountable. Because if you don't watch it, anything can happen after that.
Right. It's the whole, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. Well, if it's not supervised, it may not happen either. That piece about the specialization has come up a couple times, like if it's zone leaders, if it's OR liaisons, if it's educators. I hear that loud and clear, because you give ownership of the process to the people, and then there is that kind of built-in, baked-in accountability all the way down to the front line. It's not like, hey, we got a director somewhere that's going to hold us accountable. It's not like we're all accountable for different parts of this process, but together we're all watching each other because we're all part of the big puzzle. I know we've got about 8 minutes or so left here, but it would be a shame if we didn't get to the March to Zero, because that was such a big part of the award and the write-up. So what is the March to Zero, and how did that impact building this vision that the whole team, the whole department, whole facility could kind of could gather around?
So March to Zero was, again, it came from our senior leadership, who wanted us to get to zero quality defects, zero bioburden, zero IUSS, so because that's, our goal. It should be zero, not 3%.
Right.
IUSS, you shouldn't try to shoot for a 3% IUSS, even though some hospitals, it may sound really, really good for them. Your goal should always be zero. Now, if you have one IUSS that had to be done because of something dropped on the floor and it's one of a kind critical instruments, then we understand the reason behind your IUSS. We understand that. However, we had to go to March to Zero. So we wanted zero trays at 7 o'clock in the morning. Now, we came from, a nice number of trays at 7 o'clock in the morning. So
right.
Being a level 1 trauma center, we know that it's going to be hard to accomplish, because you have a case that comes in the middle of the night and you walk in 7 o'clock in the morning. Now you have 10, 20 trays on the shelf. So that March to Zero was, all of those things. And we started on that journey to get to that. And even though in some areas we were at, 23% this, 10% that, it was a lot of high numbers. But once we had the March to Zero, we watched those numbers started to drop. And as they drop, we changed the goal. We would lower the goal because our IUSS, it was, up there. So now we're, way at the bottom. We're at, some of our areas, we're at 0.001%, crazy numbers like that. So we love to target zeros, even though it's, it's a big target.
It's a bold target, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lost goal to set. But I think what we tried to tie it to was zero patient harm, right? So that's healthcare. No patient harm by 2025. We're really focused on making sure we do that. And we know it's a big goal, and we know there's human error and there's things that happen, but it's really, again, focus on what can we put in place to stop those holes in the cheese from getting, to another place where we have to use IUSS, or we have to do something, or we get a defect. What can we put in place to make that the best we can, so that we can limit the amount of defects that we have? And like Yves said, we have the march to zero. It doesn't mean our goal was zero right out the gate. We knew we had to just keep working on it. So it's setting goals and then constantly going back to those and saying, okay, we met them. Now what? Now what are you going to put it to? How farther are we going to bring it down? And we just keep, chopping away at it, improving it, and making it lower and lower, and showing like where we were before we came here. Even since we won the award, that's not where it stopped. We walked right in the next day and said, okay, that was awesome.
What's the next goal?
Yeah. Where are we going to keep pushing? And, that's an important transition here, really to my last question, which is, and, for folks that are either building toward this award, like you just mentioned, it was never about the award, right? It was about the patients. It was about the March to Zero. It was about the team showing that we can accomplish awesome, amazing things together. For everybody who's tuning in and listening and wants to build a team like that and wants to get the kind of recognition, that comes for the award for all the hard work that's been put in, is there like one or two things you both can share? Like, where would you tell people to start? Like, how would you encourage them along the way? Like, anything that you learn, it can kind of be taken away tomorrow back to their team so they can get started on these changes, process changes, like, building towards something that's that their team and their health system can be proud about.
So just remember, let's just say that we, senior leadership came with a goal of 10%, and we hit 9. We would have been celebrating. But that's 9% of people exposed to bioburden, exposed to tray being IUSS, exposed to critical missing instruments, holes in trays. I mean, all the things that we track. Could you imagine? So lowering that number, don't be afraid as a leader. Don't be afraid to lower that number, to set a bold goal to get your staff to reach to it. I would say, invest in your staff. They can make or break you. Don't crush them. That's so important for you to build their morale, build their courage, build them as leaders. So as Katie built me as a leader, I'm building Mikey, Felice, Lisa, those guys that report to me, I'm building them as a leader. And it is a requirement that they pull someone up. Everyone is building each other up, and we build each other as a department. And while we're doing all of this great stuff, guess who's benefiting out of all of it? The patient. Our patients is benefiting.
All right, Katie, I'll give you the last word here.
Sure. I would probably say, like Yves said, it's really focusing on the team and hearing from them and what the changes need to be. But from a leader standpoint, I think in the OR and sterile processing all around, we tend to be a siloed area. We really keep our doors closed. We don't like anybody to come in. It's just the way we're built. But open those doors up. Be transparent. I know it's scary sometimes when your data looks bad or things aren't right. But if you're not transparent, you can't get the help that you need. You have to be willing to share that, and then how you're going to fix it and what you need with those teams. And let people come in from the outside. Outside eyes were huge for us. Having infection prevention involved with us, being our partners. It's tough to get those reports back that you're not meeting the expectation, or you missed this or you missed that. But you build on that and you create those changes. And then I think the last thing is don't get bogged down. It's a big journey, and it's a long journey. So set your goals and celebrate those milestones when you hit them, because you're going to have a lot of them. across the journey, and that, you know, the end is all about the patient and your team, but celebrate every little step along the way.
I love that. I love that. Well, there has been a tremendous amount of really applicable takeaways from this session. I appreciate y'all sharing the nitty-gritty and the insights and perspectives that you've gained throughout this process. You know, congrats again for the great award, and please share our congratulations again to the team. Not only the award, you know, but that you're keeping that momentum going even till today. And with that, let's turn it back over to Brett and turn y'all loose to get back to your day, okay? All right, thank you both. Yeah.
Thanks, Shane.
All right, thanks, Hank. Thanks, Yves and Katie. That was an inspiring conversation, to say the least. So a lot of good takeaways, and really appreciate everything that you do for your patients in your facility. And congratulations once again on behalf of our team. That's a great accomplishment, and keep doing what you're doing. Obviously, we ran a little long because there was so many engaging you know, parts to that discussion. So we're going to have to hop off here quick. Don't have any time for any Q&A, but like I said at the beginning, we can certainly answer any questions, or Yves and Katie can also be available through their contact information on the right side of the screen, or you can check in with them on LinkedIn. So we'll see you guys quick. It's a quick turnaround in about 10 or so minutes. So we'll see you for the next one. Thanks.